Hello and welcome to this video. Today we will talk about word classes, clause elements, and grammatical phrases. You might be a mother tongue speaker looking for some clarification on some parts, or you may be a second language learner who wants to know the differences between these three, and also to learn how to analyze sentences. This video won't go into a lot of details or any in-depth information, but this is more an overall and general video of how you can think and how you should categorize things to better analyze sentences that you might struggle with. All right? So there are many basic differences if we look at word classes and clause elements. So here we see word classes are actually in a very, if you simplify it, you could say that word classes are actually categories. So there are categories for different kind of word classes with special characteristics that belong to that category. So most of the words in the dictionary you can find at the end of the word what kind of word class it belongs to. What you have to think about though is that even though a word belongs to a certain category, if it's used in a different sense, it could also be placed in another category. For instance, walk, as I have as example here. Walk is both a noun, you can say a walk, for instance, but it's also a verb. You can say, oh, I need to walk to the store today, or something of that sort. So be extra careful that you think about how the word could be used, because then it could be placed in another kind of word class. But in many cases, most verbs and nouns, most verbs can actually work as nouns as well. And here you have the example. You have dog, cat, walk, and gently. I'll not go through all the different categories, but if you think word classes equals category, what the word is and what characteristics the word has. And then when we talk about clause elements, we are looking at the function of the word, not of the word, of the sentence. We look at the word but in a context. So, for instance, the dog is running. Then we look at the dog. Who is doing what? The dog is doing something. So the dog becomes the subject of the sentence. And what is the dog doing? The dog is running. And that is the verb, the predicate of the sentence. And then we're talking in clause elements terms. So here I have listed the different word classes and clause elements. Word classes, there are 9 word classes, and most of them I think you'll recognize. We talk about nouns, we talk about verbs, we talk about adjectives, we talk about adverbs, we talk about pronouns, numerals, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. But with clause elements, it's a bit different. We look at the function of the words in the context, in the sentence. So we talk about the subject, predicate, which is also the verb. Talk about object, predicative, and adverbial. And once again, I will not go into depth of what these categories mean or what these terms mean. I will just try to enforce the thought pattern of how you can analyze sentences. So let's move on to grammatical phrases, which is also an important part when you try to analyze sentences. So a grammatical phrase consists of one or more words, and the group of words is of a grammatical unit that could be a clause element. All right, might be a little confusing at the start, but if we look at the phrases, there are different kinds of phrases. We'll talk about noun phrase, verb phrase, adjective phrase, adverb phrase, and prepositional phrase. And within each phrase, there is something that we call a head. So in a noun phrase, the head would be a noun. Doesn't always have to be a noun though. It can be a pronoun as well. Of course, there's always exceptions. And then, like for instance, if we talk about a verb phrase, we would look for a verb as the head, and it goes on and on. So here, a grammatical phrase always contains of a head. That's very important. We move on to the different layers. The noun phrase is usually the most common phrase. All sentences always include a noun. And then we have 3 layers we can look at. Within the grammatical phrase, we can analyze the grammatical phrase to another level. So we talk about determiners. If there's something like an article or a pronoun or a noun phrase in the genitive, then that part within the noun phrase would be a determiner. For example, an apple. The head would be the apple, but an is the determiner, right? We talk about pre-modifiers, which could be an adjective, it could be a noun, a classifying noun in the genitive. A girl's school, for instance. And then A is determiner, girls is pre-mod, and then we have school, which is the head of the noun phrase. And then we have post-modifiers, which is of a bunch of different things, and you will always have to go back to it and look for it if any of it fits, and then you will have to analyze the noun phrase and put whatever you found in your analysis there. So it can be a prepositional phrase, it can be a dependent clause introduced by a WH word, it can be a dependent clause introduced by a past participle, it could be a dependent clause introduced by a verb in the infinitive, a verb in the infinitive, an adjective, an adverb, another noun phrase. Basically, the list is long. But we're moving on. I'm not gonna talk more about these things. Moving on to the sentence analysis. So here, when we analyze a sentence, we can look at it through 3 steps. Here I set an example, and it's last Friday, the boy with the hat went to Paris. So first, we analyze the word classes first, because they are easier to easily pick out from the sentence. So we see last, yeah, it's an adjective. Friday, it's a noun. Boy, it's a noun. With is a preposition. Hat is a noun. Went is a verb. To is a preposition. Paris is a noun. So there, it's pretty straightforward. You just need to know the categories, and then you will sort it out rather quickly. So the second step, we will check for grammatical phrases. And here I have an example. The first, last Friday, that is a one of the grammatical phrases within this sentence, and we talk about the noun phrase, because Friday is a noun and Friday is also the head. Last is an adjective, and that means it's a modifier adjective. I put it there. Also called, it's a post modifier, and then you can specify it if you want to. And the third is the most difficult stage of the sentence analysis. We check for the clause elements, of course. And I haven't gone through it all in this video, but for instance, the boy, he's the one doing the action, so he's the subject. And then you continue and you look for what does he do, and all the words have its own function within the sentence. It's just to try to figure out what function it is. So now I've gone through all the 3 ways you can think when you analyze a sentence, and the most basic way to analyze a sentence.